amazing Silent Hill Unreal 4 tribute. And with that, I'm going to turn this over and let him take over, and he's got some awesome stuff to tell you guys today.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. So, as you said, my name is Wiktor Öhman, and I'm the lead artist at Quixel. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for the incredible reception of this scene. Made all those hours working on, urine-covered urinals worth it. And yeah, it's good to be back on the stream. It's been a while. And so yeah, before I jump into the breakdown, I thought I'd just sort of run through the talking points a bit. It's a very simple scene, this one, or simple scenes. So hopefully I'll have some time to do some deep dives into the different aspects. So I'll go over the sort of the basic scene in Maya, the application of materials and the modifications I've done to them, some tips and tricks there, optimization of decals and how to use them properly, layering them, lighting and RTX, post-processing, and grading finally. And then we'll also have, if we have time, some Q&A at the end. So starting off, we have two scenes. We have this clean one, and then we have the horror one. Let me just hit play here too. There we go. We have this horror one. And they are both using the same base geometry. And they just really have slightly altered materials and a whole bunch more decals and, general tweaks like that. And so I'll just hop back here to the clean one and sort of show you the geometry here in Maya. So as you can see, it's really, really basic. It's it's really just a couple of extruded boxes. Here's the urinal and the UVs. Let me show you those real quick here. So pretty much just some planar mapping going on, nothing crazy. And that was really the point of this environment. I really wanted to make something that where the like the materials and the lighting does all of the heavy lifting. And for this one, I'm relying heavily on ray tracing in Unreal. And as I said, the material definition. So you might see here the before I go further, I just want to clarify. So we see here that I'm capped at 60 FPS, and that is because OBS was giving me some really hard time with some resource allocation or something like that. So I had to cap the frame rate and so on. But otherwise, when I'm not streaming in full HD, I'm getting 120 FPS in this scene, or in both versions of the scene. So if we start off by taking a look at the materials here, they're all using the basic material that you get from Bridge, which I use to import all the materials. And I'll just show you real quick here, sort of just so you know how they're set up. They're not the cleanest right now, but we'll sort of just go through it from the back here. Pretty basic UV controls. You can offset the different axes, U and V, adjust overall tiling, and sort of that just connects into the different maps here. First up, we have the albedo, we have the metallic, roughness, normal, and displacement. And for the albedo, what I did is I added a desaturation node, which is something that I do for pretty much all my master materials. And it just allows me to, by increasing the value here, decreasing the saturation. And then I also added a contrast or a power node, coupled with some a multiply with 3 vectors, so I can control the tint. And finally, I have an intensity node here. It's just a constant plugged into a multiply, and that just goes into the base color. So those were really the major changes. Just some extra control for the albedo. And if we jump back here and I adjust a couple of these parameters, such as the albedo int, you can see that the wall is getting darker or brighter. And if I adjust the desaturation 0, it gets more saturated. So those are a couple of things that I prefer to have in my materials, and they're really nothing crazy. But if we take a closer look here, just looks freaking beautiful, especially with coupled with ray tracing. Like we can toggle it on and off. We can see some differences here. If I just the reflections are just so much nicer. If I go down here, where is it? Reflections. Absolutely love it. So yeah, that's pretty much how all my materials look. But so what really does the heavy lifting here are the decals, and they're not really obvious in this scene, I guess. And that is a point. Like, I really wanted to try and utilize decals in a very, very subtle way. So if we just open this up here, I have two groups here. One is just like the general, like everything, and the other one is the gradients. And I covered the gradients a little bit in the breakdown video that we posted this Tuesday. And so if we just toggle this on and off again, you'll see it's a very subtle difference. And you can just zoom in here, and you see this very subtle gradient coming up from this sort of tile area. And what they are, like, they're really just a linear texture that I'm using as a decal. Very, very simple material, just 75 instructions. And it's a really nice thing to have, not only to sort of get more control on top of the SSAO, but also to make that, it's very subtle miscoloration, wear and tear, and dirt and dust accumulation that you get. Like it's like at first glance it's not noticeable, but once I sort of remove it, then the scene starts looking a bit flat, and is something I do occasionally. And other than that, we have a whole bunch of these sort of cracks and like grime, like mold decals, some more cracks. And the fun thing here is that I'm actually using, like most of these are actually asphalt decals, but they work really well for what they're being used for. So what I did is I actually just removed the color. I think I desaturated it. I increased the intensity and sort of just matched it to the color here. So it's you can save some performance by sort of reusing stuff for things they're not intended to be used for. And everything here actually uses tileable materials. There is nothing that is uniquely textured. The sink, the urinals, the walls, everything is just tileable. So I've tried to keep it optimized. And so that brings me to my next point, and that is the decals. Got a lot of comments. Obviously, as I said before, I got a lot of really nice words and compliments, but I also got a lot of questions about like performance with the decals. And the amount of decals that I've used, they didn't really affect the performance at all in my scenes. But I thought I'd just sort of go over the some basic information regarding decals and how they work and sort of what you should keep in mind. And you might think that applying a decal, so let me just real quick just show a decal to someone who doesn't really know what they are. So this here, this paper, this poster on the wall, this is a decal, and it's basically a projection of a material onto another surface. And so one might think that the more complex a static mesh is, the more complex and heavy the actual decal projection is. But that is not the case at all, actually. Yeah, the mesh that they're projected to is really irrelevant. What does matter and what can affect performance is if you have a very, very big decal. Like the more screen space a decal covers, the more expensive it is. So, and by screen space, I mean like how big the bounding box is. And what also affects the performance is how expensive the actual material is. So I have a couple of different materials, but we can see here I have 84 instructions, which is not bad at all. We can check out the decal master material. So it's pretty much the same thing as the standard surface material that I showed you before. So each decal is actually not very expensive at all, and each decal is taking up pretty limited screen space. So as long as you sort of keep those things in mind, you should be good, and your scene should run. And then obviously, like you probably don't want to go this intense with decals and this sort of dense with decals if you have an open world or something. But for more enclosed areas like this and hallways and rooms, I would say it's perfectly fine. Let me just open up the horror version here. Don't save. And there we go. So as you can see here, sorry, did you say something, Jonathan?
Yeah, I wanted to pop in and maybe add a little bit to what you were saying with the decals. One of the things I do with our scan library when it comes to setting up materials is I actually like to add some what I would consider Photoshop-like controls to the opacity map. To sometimes there's additional details that you might want to push in those cracks that make them even more apparent. And if you run, I know it might be hard to visualize, but if you run a multiply node with a power node and then run two constant vectors attached to that, you can actually and plug that in with the alpha. You can actually control how much contrast the alpha has, which can make some of these decals even more apparent and make them even more strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, so let me just jump into the camera here. There we go. So as you can see here, there are a little bit more decals in this one, and the scene is running just as well, getting the same 60 capped FPS and 120 when uncapped. But in this one, in this version, I'm utilizing the decals in a very different way. I'm stacking a whole bunch of decals on top of each other. I'm using them sort of in a much more aggressive manner, and like this is really where the usage of decals was fun. Like just going nuts with blood spatter and broken tiles like this. And it's funny, like we've had these blood decals for ages, but I've never really had the chance, to just go nuts and spray blood everywhere. So that was a lot of fun. Finally getting to use those. So and that actually also brings. I'm good at segueing today, I'm noticing. But so the next thing I want to talk about was sort of detail layering and using multiple decals on top of each other. So that is a time when it could be a bit heavier, and where you want to take a little bit more care. So obviously there's going to be overlapping with the opacity, but same thing applies. Like it's the complexity of the material, and it's also the size of the actual decal. And on top of that, to sort of do the actual layering, so let me just find a good spot. So down here I'm going pretty crazy with all kinds of decals. I have these small pebbles, I have the blood, I have the broken tiles, I have some, it's like, yeah, you can see it's a whole bunch of decals down here. So what I had to do in order to control sort of which one is being shown first and which order, it's really, really simple. It's something that I found out a little bit too late in my career. But yeah, it's just sort order. Basically, the higher you put it in the order, the higher it, like the further up in the layering, so to speak, it shows up. So yeah, you can see here like the this rubble is below the blood for some reason. That's probably just my mistake. It should be above. But yeah, so if I just choose this one, so the blood here, this blood is at the bottom. So you can see everything is above this one, and this one is at the 0. So that is the way that worked, and you can see here I've used this layering all across the walls and all across the room. I've gone pretty crazy with it here, decal upon decal upon decal, and it works really well. But the sort of the key to doing this is, or at least in this case, obviously it differs from project to project, but is to be subtle. So this where is it? I think it's this one here. Yeah, the mold. So this one is actually very, very strong, but what I did is I just lowered the opacity, and then I put another sort of decal on top of that, and then I put this repaired plaster on top of that. Everything with slightly lower opacity than the other, so it sort of just builds up and looks really realistic and believable. At least I think so. And yeah, that, I mean, I guess that goes for pretty much everything. Like, don't like be subtle. Like, don't overdo it. Yeah, Jonathan, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, so we mentioned this last week in the call with, I can't even remember his name for the life of me. Jack. Jack. Gosh, I feel so silly. And with Jack, we were talking about how a lot of these details are just, you have to approach this as though you're sculpting something or you're drawing something. When you're putting decals on a wall, true, a lot of that is done for you because the decal is the final product in a sense. But how you apply them and the way that you did this is you approached it in a way that most artists should approach things. You start with the blockout form, and then you continually refine until you get to the fine details. If you immediately go for that fine detail, all that stuff that you put on the wall there would have just looked overpowering, and it wouldn't have blended together very well.
Yes, exactly.
So the way you did it is brilliant. I mean, it really just highlights how strong a decal-based workflow is and how much it can push the visual fidelity of these scenes.
Thank you. And so, but then on the other hand, there are areas where I use decals really heavy-handedly and where it actually works really well. So actually, if I just toggle the decals on and off, you can see just how much they add to the scene. So here with it off, and here they are on. So you can see it just transforms the scene entirely. Like, this is, if you sort of look past the grading, this is very similar to the clean version. And so really the decals is what transforms it. So what I was saying before about the decal where I was really heavy-handed was this one, for example. So if I toggle this on and off, you can see like it's a really strong decal, and I've really boosted the normal information, like normal strength in it. But I think it looks good. Like unless you go extremely up close at an extreme angle, I think like this works really, really well, and can save you a lot of geometry data or geometry. So I use the same thing over here, this one here. But I'm doing the same thing here, like I'm layering. So I put this like thin crack in the middle there as well, and sort of accentuate the middle part there where there's supposed to be like a separation between the tiles, etc. And so how could you optimize this? So I didn't do it, but I know I really wanted to. But yeah, I had some other things on my table, so I didn't have time to do it, unfortunately. But what you can do is you can very easily sort of just merge a bunch of these decals together in Photoshop or whatever tool you want to use. Like you could take all of these decals, just make one mega decal out of it, or maybe not the last one that I chose there. There we go. So then you just have one draw call instead of these 5, I think it is. So that's one thing you could do. And if you really want to do a decal heavy workflow, you can do deferred rendering using deferred decals, and that's gonna really make it cheap and performant. Yeah. Do we have any questions regarding decals, by the way, before I sort of move on to the other parts? I think you're muted, Jonathan.
That's actually a good point. I have to make sure I don't interrupt you. As I was saying, there's always questions, and one of the good ones that we just got was in regards to mesh decals. Hambo would like to know if there's any chance that you could potentially discuss the usage of mesh decals. So, for example, getting decals to go around corners of pillars, corners of buildings, making concrete look as though it's been kind of damaged and destroyed on certain edges, things of that nature.
Yes, so I have very limited experience using mesh decals, to be honest. I mainly use trim sheets in a similar fashion and regular decals. But if you, Jonathan, have any experience with it, please chime in and enlighten us both.
Oh yes, put me on the spot, why don't you? Do I have experience with mesh decals? Yes, I actually do, to an extent. And some of that's been done using our scans, because you can actually turn them into mesh decals if you take the decals and use them as in that particular manner. It just takes a little bit of finagling. You need to worry about averaging normal directions so that the normals of the mesh don't interfere with the normals of the actual decal itself. Things of that particular, you have to just think of that when you're working. It can be tough to get them to work sometimes, because a lot of the decals that we make are more for simply applying, not so much for kind of chopping up. But with anything that you work with, if you're willing to put in the time to understand how to create what it is that you're looking for, then you can really do anything you want. So this isn't really my stream. I don't want to take over for you. So by all means, continue.
Well, thank you very much. I am enlightened. So yes, and I actually realized I sort of skipped over something that I wanted to show real quick, and that was regarding the materials and the decals. So one thing that really helped convert this from clean to horror-based, other than the decals, and doing some tweaks to the materials, is the tile material here. So all the other materials in the scene are the exact same thing, except, with some contrast and intensity tweaks. Like on this wall, I sort of made this a little bit darker. So yeah, the tiles material, what I did there, I just took the exact same tiles into Mixer, and I sort of made it look more broken and have sort of tiles falling off, and made it, added some nasty edge grime and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun to use a mixer like this, like sort of marrying scan data with proceduralism. So really, all I did here is I combined this tile grout, I'm not sure how to explain it, together with these tiles. And what I then did is I drive the height of these tiles using a base layer here, which has some jittering, both brightness and gradient, and also some cutout. And the cutout here, the jitter, is what actually sort of drives the how many tiles has fallen off. So if I adjust a random seed, you can see, it's just randomly removing these tiles. We can just check out the mask here, so you can see what's going on. And I can also adjust the amount to control how many. Now they're like, it's just grout, and now it's all tiles. So yeah, it was a really fun fun way of using the mixer. As if you've seen my art, you've probably seen I I like to do some pretty crazy stuff in mixers. So doing something more down to earth was really fun, and it's actually something that I've used in other projects after this. So it was a really useful workflow to use. So yeah, that was yeah. Before I close the mixer down, do we have any questions regarding the mixer? Anything they want me to show here?
Not currently, but
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say that I think it's really neat that you've managed to make the way these masks are working. Like you've married the scan data that we have with the procedural parts of the mixer stack, which is great, because sometimes when you're working procedurally, it can be very obvious that you're doing that. Like those squares when you're popping them out and it looks like a hellish Rubik's cube. Um, it's great that you like, I think that you actually used what was it, Rapta base to kind of get it to mask the that procedural nature of those particular tiles. Would I be correct there?
I didn't hear the last part. What did you say there?
So to mask the procedural shapes, like to get rid of some of that like harsh edging on the squares,
Yeah.
my guess is that you were using Rapta base on the upper tile layer. Would I be correct?
No, I actually used a bevel on the base layer here. So if we just check this layer out, you can see it's sort of smoothed out. And that is the actual mask. So I just adjusted the bevel here, very subtly.
Cool.
Now we got a chocolate bar. So yeah, that's how I made that. So I will. Oh, we're already halfway through the stream, so I gotta speed things up here. So where were I? Right. So I want to talk about the lighting and ray tracing, or RTX. So as I said, the main thing I wanted to do with this scene was to really make something that was, you know, extremely quick to model out, because, you know, I much prefer working with textures and composition, and modeling sort of, yeah, it takes a long time, and it sort of prevents me from seeing the final picture. So I wanted to get there really quickly, so I made a super simple scene, and I just wanted the lighting and the materials to do the heavy lifting. So obviously ray tracing was something that I wanted to use. So I'll just jump over to the clean version here, which more heavily relies upon that. And once again, I had to turn the ray tracing down because of some issues with OBS, causing OBS to stutter. So if that is the sort of dots or sort of flickering you see in the corner here. But yeah, that's because I've really reduced the sort of sample count. But so the cool thing about this one is that it's really just being driven by two rectangular lights. So there's, I mean, it could be driven by one really, but I sort of wanted this light around corner to sort of draw the eye in. But yeah, I'm using two rectangular lights. That's it. And ray tracing does, you know, takes care of the rest. So if we go ahead and turn that off, like, actually, if we can just turn ray tracing on and off, you can sort of see what's going on. So now it's off, and now it's on. So I'm not sure how well it's being picked up on the stream, but it's pretty noticeable here, and especially, you know, in the darker places. Like, we can check out the roof up here. If I turn that off, you can see like the roof is just dark. Like, it's a pretty dark material, but well, it's not dark, but it's like it's completely unlit. But once I turn on the global illumination, like the light from the room sort of just bounces up and illuminates it. And excuse me. So it just made everything easier, and it sort of just like the shadows became a lot more, you know, smooth, like they very realistic. So if I go into the lights here and if I search for ray tracing, we can turn on and off the ray trace shadow, so you can see sort of just how much difference it makes. So if I can find a good angle here. So not only does it properly sort of diffuse the shadows, but it also makes sure like that you don't get any light bleed, like light coming through the side of the behind meshes and stuff like that. So it really does a lot of work for you, and it just makes it look a bit nicer. So in this urinal here, you can see we got some light shining through from back here. If I turn the shadows off, back on, it just sort of just makes it look watertight and beautiful. If you can call a urinal beautiful. And then on top of the lighting, so since we're in a bathroom, like one of the reasons, you know, why we went for a bathroom was because the lighting, which would lend itself very well to ray tracing, and also because there's a lot of reflective materials. We have the tiles, we have the sort of lino floor, we have mirrors, we have porcelain. So like there's so much stuff that's reflective. So if we turn reflections off and on, you can see just how much you get from that. Drink some tea here. So you can just turn that off and on again. So off and on. Nighttime, daytime. So yeah. Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to do the sort of comparison in the horror version again. Play. Set it. There we go. So in this one, I'm not using global illumination, but instead I am using reflections, and the reflections are doing just as much in this scene as it did in the other one. It just sort of, it's kind of hard to explain, but you just get so much for free. Like it just grounds everything and connects everything that's reflective. And like the more bounces your computer or target hardware can afford, the better, obviously, because you know you can have like mirrors mirroring mirrors, you know, infinitely if you have the computing power. And like it's subtle, but like if you do the on and off comparison that you see so often online, like it's you really can't tell when it's like side by side. So, if I go back again to the clean one here, and so yes, regarding the global illumination and the lighting, so the interesting thing here is that not only sort of does the light propagate nicely and evenly across the scene, but it also, you know, samples colors that are on the wall. So this scene doesn't demonstrate that very well, but let's say well, I guess I could demonstrate it. No, it would be funny if my demonstration doesn't work just because I'm in a stream now. If I'm wrong, but we'll see. But yeah, if I adjust the sort of redness, yeah, we're getting bounces, like red bounces up here in the ceiling from the light. So yeah, that was sort of how I lit the clean version. If I go back into the horror version here, I'll just sort of quickly go over how I set that up, since I'm not using ray tracing here. So you can see here, I have a couple more rectangular lights and also a couple spotlights. And part of the reason why I have more lights is because I'm actually sort of covering more ground here. So for the ArtStation pose and the promotional material for it, I needed more angles than just the hero shot, you know, for the transformation. I needed a shot here, looking back into the bathroom, also one here, looking into this really nasty corner. So I needed some more lights. Like I needed lights behind, and I also needed lights, like more sort of defined light here. And so we can just sort of toggle the lights on and off, I guess, like the spotlights, sort of just see how I went about lighting it. So if I turn these off, and we got the rectangular light here. So this one I'm really more using like an ambient light. Whereas in the previous one, this was like the key light. This was what really lit the entire thing, like the main focal point light and all that. Whereas now it's a little bit more subtle. And instead, I'm using a spotlight. And the reason for doing that is, yeah, it's pretty obvious. Like I really wanted that contrast. I really wanted to, you know, pull the focus towards this area here, which is, yeah, it really is the, you know, focal point. So yeah, it was just easier to work with a spotlight than a rectangular light there. And then the second thing I added, let me just double check which one that is. That is, where are you? Oh, there you go, there you go. Which is actually not doing anything. Interesting. Right, so let's move on to the next one, which is behind the corner here. So this one, I'm actually, so sorry if I'm confusing you, but this one I'm actually using as the actual light for the fluorescent light here. So I'm like really powerful, really high intensity, and yeah, it really works together with like the general darkness in the scene, and just sort of having this, you know, really overpowering, almost sort of sour light, you know, like the whites become, you know, almost crunched there. It sort of just gives you that horror feel. Then I also have a spotlight here, which I sort of just use to add a little bit of bounce to this door here. Some fake GI. And that's really all. Oh yeah, this one of course. I love this one. I know it makes total like no sense at all to have this light on the floor here, but it just looks so damn cool. Sorry about my French. So if you can see like it's just casting these beautiful shadows behind there, and the way that I'm sort of faking, well, not faking, but like the way I'm getting these softer shadows is because I've increased the source height and the source width. So like you can make them sharper, or you can make them, you know, like I absolutely love these rectangular lights. I think they were added like 2 versions ago of the engine, and they're so powerful. Like when I discovered this, I was like, yeah, mind blown. So and these are all like, there's no baked lighting at all in the scene. Everything is 100% dynamic, and yeah, it's running really well. And so yeah, do you have anything to add, Jonathan, before I sort of move on from the lighting?
So we have a user question that I'll hop onto in just a second. But in terms of lighting, I think it really speaks for just, you know, modern engines, regardless of which one you use, because pretty much all of them use physically based rendering now. That you can get away with such few lights.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, when we were younger, right, we had to put a bunch of fill lights in everywhere to simulate what actual reflections would look like. That we're able to do this with just a couple of lights, and the reflective qualities of the PBR system just bring everything. Like, it's not perfect, but it's so close. Like, it's almost indistinguishable from reality in the way it works.
Absolutely.
So that's just awesome. I love it. I love that we're in this time where we can make this kind of art without having to go crazy doing it.
Exactly.
And that being said, we had a question regarding, let's see, the chat is scrolling so quick, it's kind of hard to keep up with it.
Music to my ears.
It was IES profiles. One of the users would like to know if you actually use any IES profiles in these lights.
I do not, and I actually totally forgot about that, and I'm sort of beating myself up over that right now. That's a really good idea, and I'm stupid for not doing that. That's for those out there who don't know what IES profiles are, it's really like the you know, the shape of a light source. You know, every single light source out there, be they light bulbs or spotlights or halogens or xenon lights, like they have their own sort of profile, like they're the way they look. And like it's They can be used for, like, in some cases it's just because of the way they're manufactured. In some cases it's by design. And what you can do is you can actually download most of those profiles either from the developers themselves, or manufacturers, I mean, or from sites that sort of collect that stuff, and you can just plug that into your lights. So if I take my spotlight here, just search for IES, I can just plug a texture right in there, and the light is just gonna the appearance of the light is gonna be transformed. And you can even get the actual IES intensity derived from, like, the same intensity as it is in the real world. So, if you really want to create something hyper-realistic using artificial lights, plug an IES profile in there, use IES intensity, and there you go.
Yeah, IES is amazing.
Yep.
If you guys didn't know too, IES can be found on pretty much almost any manufacturer's site. I'm pretty sure you just mentioned that.
Yep.
But the ability to just get, I'm surprised that they offer it for free. It's almost like proprietary lighting data, you would think.
Exactly. I guess it's copyrighted, so.
True. That is very true.
Yeah.
So you were going to talk about post-processing now, right?
Exactly. So post-processing and grading. So if we go back to the clean one, and don't save, and hop into the camera. So what we're seeing here is really sort of the stock camera. Like, it's not, there's no grading, there's like nothing going on at all except the default camera. And if we hop into the cinematic camera, we can see there's a little bit of stuff going on, but it's nothing too dramatic. So we can toggle the grading on and off. Like, yeah, it changes the sensor width as well. But generally what it does is, let me just turn the GI on. So really the main thing that it does is just a very, very subtle, like, color temperature shift. And we can actually take a look here if we can find something that's obviously changed. But I actually don't think I did much here. Yeah, changed the white balance from 6500 to 6300. I adjusted. I actually have a color grading lookup table here. Interesting. So 0, 1. Yeah. So it's going from very muted. So yeah, my mistake there. I did make a little bit of difference there. So what I did here is I have a very, very dull version, and I'm adding some contrast. Right, now it's coming back to me. I added some contrast, I adjusted the color temperature, and sort of I was going for that, sort of 80s communal restroom. Those, like, the kind of restrooms that are, really well maintained, but they're still sort of yucky. Like, you don't want to really go in there because so many people use them, and it's like, yeah. So yeah, I wanted to sort of get that sort of color with a grade. Yeah, it's nothing too dramatic. Mainly just a contrast or curve adjustment, some slight color tweaks. Whereas in the or actually, no, there's nothing more I want to cover here. So the interesting stuff comes in the horror version. Hit play. There we go. So if we, okay, so we have two parts to cover here. So we both have the camera, in which I do a couple things, and we have the post-process volume. So if we go in, excuse me, a bit of a cold. So if we turn off the post-processing, you can see, like, this is a transformation. This is a really powerful grade here. So what's going on here? So yeah, I have a whole bunch of grading, like a lookup table grading, and I'm also doing, sort of in-engine tinting. Yeah, I mean, they're like, mainly it's contrast, like brightness contrast, and I'm getting a bird whispering in my ear that we're sort of running out of time, so I'm gonna really keep this short. But so, like, the key things here, like the key things to grade something, horror-y is, contrast. like bright focal points where you want to guide the eye, like that goes for everything, and like high contrast and like sickly colors, you know, yellows and green, brown, like some tints of purple or teal, like those sort of colors. Certain versions of those colors really work well. So I really went for that sort of yellow, like sickly yellow, like, you know, like sick skin, and like this like blue, so, and I accentuated those colors in the grading. And the second thing that I wanted to talk about was the, you know, post-processing. And really main things I did here was I adjusted the, if I jump into it, I adjusted the what's it called, grain. The grain, so in the clean one, I barely have any grain at all. Whereas in the horror version, I have a lot of grain that's sort of flickering. I'm not sure how well it's picked up in the stream, but yeah, it's there. And I also had some chromatic aberration, like 0.15. Like, I didn't want to overdo it, but a little bit of it. Like, you know, chromatic aberration is a typical sort of horror post-process, like especially in jump scares in games, you know. So yes, that was just about the basics. So now some Q&A, Jonathan.
So this is really some Q&A from me, but I'm sure as the as the audience kind of hears what we're talking about, they're going to chime in too, and I'll bring in their questions as well. I know you like to work on games and bring them, you know, to a better visual fidelity. Like you started with Counter-Strike, from what I recall recently. I'm sure you've done stuff before. And then now you're working on Silent Hill. What really gives you the inspiration to do stuff like this? Like maybe in a way that we can have the audience relate to it.
So the reason why I'm making, you know, love sort of doing remakes or fan art, I mean, it's a pretty common thing. I don't know why it's common, but I assume it's for the same reason as I like to do it. And it's just like games is really what sort of got me into the, you know, 3D industry or 3D sort of career. Like I love games, I love the environment, and I always was like, how does this work? Like for me, it was just like they were just, you know, magically popping out of Japan, you know. Like I had no idea how they were being made. So like they always had this sort of magical, like almost, you know, unreal, like like a magical thing. So when I started learning 3D, I was like, whoa, I can actually recreate these things that I love to run around in, and I can sort of do my own spin on it. And like I can maybe I can even make it better in some cases. So yeah, I guess, like, long story short, I guess that is the reason. Like it's what got me into it, and I can sort of redo it with my own touch.
You know, a pretty in-depth explanation for that. That's great. I've had the same experiences myself. You know, I make art on the side. That's not my primary role here at Quixel, but to me, I kind of feel like I need to just do it to make things like what you're making, just so I can feel, I don't want to say useful, but just to feel like I'm running with the pack and keeping up with you guys, because you guys are setting so many trends with these scenes that you're making. It's amazing. So unfortunately, like, the chat seems to have disconnected, so I've gotten a relayed question from I Follow You Leet. You'd like to know, have you guys tried using any custom Unreal Engine builds with included new features like VXGI by NVIDIA, GameWorks, etc.?
I tried a branch, like personally, I tried a branch of the VXGI. I barely had time to play with it, unfortunately. But yeah, it's unfortunately, I don't have that much time to, you know, play with the sort of experimental branches as much as I'd like to. And so since the chat disconnected, I actually fortunately prepared a couple questions from the comments on the breakdown. So I have 3 of them here, and the first one was, ask me how like if I can make a video on how I rendered the video, like how I made the actual fly through. And So the way I did it was using the matinee, and there's really nothing special about it. So unfortunately, it's like everything's disconnected now because I'm in a different scene. But basically, what I do is, in here, I select the camera, I hit like a starting point, keyframe, move to the second point, keyframe, and there we go. So then I have like this interpolation between those 2 points in space. When I'm happy with that, I just hit render this movie, save it out, and there we go. So what I usually like to do is I render at a very high resolution, high quality, and then I can then you can downscale, add some sharpen in your video editing software, whatever you want to do. But in broad strokes, that's what I did, and I think we're actually going to be making a video on how to make videos like this. Please don't quote me on that, but yeah, if I remember correctly, that is something in the pipe. And the second question is about my PC configuration. So right now I'm running on my home PC, like my personal PC, and my personal computer. And that is running an i9 9900K. CPU and a 2080 Ti GPU and 32 gigabytes of RAM. So it's a pretty high-end computer. And also some questions regarding like if you need an RTX card to run this. You don't have to, but it's recommended. I think it's anything from the 2060 and upward, which is sort of recommended. But yeah, so you can run lower, like in the 10 series, certain cards. But wait, no, sorry, it's 1060 you can use for RTX from the 10 series. But yeah, it's on a different architecture, so you're gonna get lower performance. So that's something to keep in mind. And then we got a very general question as well from a couple people in the comments. That I thought I'd touch on, and that is I'm paraquoting here. I'm sort of merging a couple of questions together, and that was sort of how to get started as a beginner. And it is this is a very, very big topic, and like everyone has their own opinions on this. So I'll just try and keep this sort of short and sort of to the point. And basically. So I'll give you my story, sort of how I got started back in the day, when the dinosaurs roamed the world. So I started really broad. Like I wanted to dabble in everything. I made characters, I made environments, I made weapons, vehicles. I mean, you name it. I made everything. And as I learned more and more, I started, noticing not only what I was sort of naturally adept at or good at, but also what I found to be fun and satisfying, and sort of gave me the results that I sort of envisioned, and that was environment art. Like I absolutely enjoy doing it, so I started focusing on that. So I started broad, and then with experience I narrowed it down, and like at this point, I'm like almost exclusively working on environments because I absolutely love it. And the more you focus, the better you can get at that thing. With that said, I'm not saying you should just do one thing, but you should try and focus on one thing so you're really good at one thing. But you should always, keep doing the other things as well. Sort of, stay on top of the game, and so you can do more things for your personal projects. And so if that was one part of it, is like, try everything, narrow down. And secondly is that like while doing all of that work, and I wish I was better at this, but like the more I do it, the more I notice like I should do it more. And that is to go out, look at the world, and bring a camera with you, because like you need to build that mental reference library. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is by using a camera, because that allows you to really observe the world in a different way. because you see the natural beauty in a different way, at least in my opinion. So, you know, go out, bring a camera, just take a look at stuff. Because if you have a big sort of mental library, that's gonna improve the quality of your art, because you know how things look. You know when things aren't looking the way they're supposed to look. That's very, very helpful. And then, you know, I still do, like, read and watch tutorials and live streams. Hello. So just like consume every single bit of knowledge there is out there. Like if you have breakfast, you know, you can just like instead of listening to a podcast, you can like put on a tutorial or something. Just watch and, you know, learn new things. And even like you never know everything. There's always something new you can learn. That is just a fact. And then find inspirational artists, artists that sort of make you want to go like, hey, why am I even doing this? Like they're so good. Like I don't even compare. Like find those people and strive to be as good and have them inspire you. Don't have them like don't feel disheartened. I said this in another stream. Like just because someone else is good doesn't mean just because someone else is better doesn't mean that you're worse. Like they're better, like, but you're still as good as you are. Like you're not getting worse because someone else is getting better, you know. So find those inspirations out there, and be inspired, not disheartened. And then, you know, the absolute biggest thing, and this goes for every single profession, every single skill and you know, hobby, is just keep at it and don't give up. And it's the biggest cliche out there, but that is the reason why, like, a lot of people, like some people don't get good. It's because they don't keep practicing. So just keep in mind, it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. So, you know, you're in it for the long haul. So just keep doing it and just keep growing.
Very inspirational stuff, Victor. Very.
Well, thank you.
I have to echo on some of those points too when it comes to not giving up. If I gave up when I first started working in 3D, back when I got into working on game mods back in 2002, I wouldn't be here right now. Trust me, you don't even want to know how horrible my first works were. Everything is an iterative process. Everything, you start from scratch somewhere. You're not as smart as you are now when you were a baby, right?
Exactly.
You had to build up to that point. When I first opened 3D Studio Max, I made an entire game map from one perspective because I didn't realize I could rotate the camera. That's how bad I was. Yeah, listen to him laugh at me, but it's true. It's absolutely true. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever said on stream, but it is absolutely true. I mean, well, maybe aside from the time I forgot Jack's name. Sorry, Jack, don't kill me, please. But you know, it's absolutely true that you have to start from somewhere. You have to build up. And if you just give up when you're in that phase of learning, then you're never going to improve. You're never going to get better. And it's not just 3D art. It's anything in life. You can't just give up on doing what you love doing because you're struggling with it. The struggle is part of the process. The struggle is part of what defines you as a person.
Yep.
If you reach and meet that challenge and improve yourself, you're really going to be happy with the end results because you're doing so much for you to improve you.
Yep.
And it's also not about other artists. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, it's fine. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, and the more you sort of stick with it, and the more you learn, like it's an exponential curve. Like the more you know, the more it's easier to learn, and the more you learn, the easier it is to learn. So it just, you know, snowballs or reverse snowball. I don't know what that's called. But yeah, I mean, it's like the more knowledge you have, the easier it is to gain more knowledge and skills. So yeah, I guess that was the last thing I wanted to say about that for this stream. And yeah.
Well, that's great. And with a minute remaining, I wanted to go ahead and chime in and let you guys know that there's some pretty cool stuff coming in the coming weeks here for the Megascans library. I don't want to get into the specifics because some things are still going to change or maybe subject to change, but you guys are really going to love what you're going to see. I absolutely guarantee it, at the risk of sounding like the guy from Men's Warehouse. So that being said, keep an eye out on the Megascans library. When it's all ready to go, we'll let you guys know with an email. It is, as always, fantastic to have you here with us. Victor just stole the show. So thanks for being here, Victor.
Yeah, thank you all for watching. It was an absolute blast. Can't wait till the next time. So yeah, thank you all very much, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Well, I'll see us next time. I don't know about you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
You'll be back.
Yes.
See you later, guys. Thanks
See
again.
ya.